Tonight we have Carl Bilsky. Carl is a veteran of the U.S. Army, where he served from 1963 to 1965. He was trained as an aircraft mechanic, and Carl got off to an interesting start by being drafted immediately after he got married. Please join me in welcoming Carl Bilsky.
Thank you very much, all of you, for coming. And I apologize for not standing. If I tried, I'd be on the floor. I wanted to stand to salute all my brothers and sisters who were in service themselves. So I thank you for your service. I'll probably get lost along the way here, so bear with me. As he mentioned, I was drafted in December of 1961, right after I was newly married. And they said I would probably go in January of 62 or February of 62. I didn't really go in until April of 63. So I sat around for 16 months waiting to go serve, which was almost my full tour. I did finally go in and went to Fort Knox for basic, and then was transferred to Alabama for aviation school.
Fort Rucker.
Pardon?
Fort Rucker.
Yes. Did you go there yourself?
Yeah, I actually went for aircraft maintenance, but they changed me and sent me to Keesler Air Force Base to become an air traffic controller.
Okay. Went through aviation maintenance school, and as an experiment, I thought, I'm not going to read any books. I'm already a mechanic. I just want to see if I can get the concept of aviation. I wanted to know how that updraft carburetor worked on that airplane. Well, they don't teach you that. You just take 4 bolts off and put a new one on. So I didn't get to learn what I really wanted to learn, but it was interesting. They had 10 little kind of outhouses with an aircraft engine on them, and they would set up a mistake in that, a plug wire off, a magneto that was bad, or whatever, and you'd have to go through all 10 of them and find out what the problem was. And I did very well. I maxed the test and found a problem they didn't realize they had. So it was interesting going through that. Not reading, but just from what I knew and what I listened in class. But I always got in trouble in class because I was precise in what I do. I think all of you can agree in your lives, the more precise you were, the farther you went. I remember we were setting the tow in on a light aircraft, and I remembered in class they said you got to have pilot, co-pilot setting in it, or sandbags to simulate that weight on those wheels. If you didn't have it, it would be like it's not in balance to set them right. And the young instructor, who was way younger than I was 23 when I went in, he's hanging on the strut to the wing and talking, and I said to the guys that were setting, I says, wait a minute, we can't set this with him hanging on the wing. And he got all mad, you know, and so he sent me to the captain. And I explained to him that would have been like one tank being empty on one side, and through the aircraft I'd have killed her. And he says, I understand, but just go along with it. So he and I met several times because I disputed what the instructor was saying. Being young, he was just being himself, and I understood that. Left Fort Rucker and was transferred out to Fort Riley, Kansas, where I served almost all my time there. You'll have to pardon me. 3 years ago, I had a serious head injury and was life-flighted to Cleveland Metro with bleeding of the brain. So now I have trouble going into my memory and drawing forth what's there. I always tell people it's like, and it's ironic that I'm in a library, it's like going to the library and the lights are off, so you have trouble finding what you're looking for. That's the way my brain is now. Stationed at Fort Riley, aircraft mechanic on the airfield. Had a little interesting bout there where we were on maneuvers, but our equipment that we used and the planes that we worked on, and I do have some pictures here if you'd like to look later of myself actually working on aircraft. Basically, I worked on this Mohawk, which was a two-person plane that they did for surveillance and shot pictures and so forth. It was a turboprop aircraft that could almost land on a dime. They came in reverse pitched and that tail came up and they just stopped right there. That was really, really interesting. I really enjoyed that. While I was there, I brought my wife with me to live off base. And out of my whole tour in the service, that's the only part that I regret, because she was a very young girl at that time and living out of state without friends, without relatives, and I was gone most of the time, and she lost her father. And that hit her harder than I could probably even understand. And consequently, I think that led to our divorce later, because she wanted a baby so bad and couldn't, and it just got worse and worse. But getting through that period, when I went in and had to wait 16 months to actually go in and serve, which I was proud to do, I went in with kind of an attitude. Not a bad attitude, not a negative attitude. My attitude was, I'm here at your service, so this hand, well, this hand don't go up so good anymore. This hand is always up. I wanted to learn everything that I could was there, so I will volunteer for whatever you need. Well, a lot of them thought I was nuts and left me alone. But a few of the officers kind of understood what I was getting at. So they came to me twice. The first time they come to me and said, "Are you serious about volunteering?" And I said, "Yes, sir." Well, they sent me to audiovisual school. And I became a licensed to run all the audio equipment, the sound equipment, and I got to show all the films coming back from Vietnam to the officers going there, and they were not pretty. So that was one part of my job, along with being an aircraft mechanic. Then they came to me again and said, "You still serious about volunteering?" And I said, "Yes, sir." They sent me down to see this lieutenant. He took me out back, gave me a .45 and said, "Shoot that target." So I put 6 rounds into the target, and I came back in, and he says, "Pack your stuff, you're now with us." I said, "Excuse me?" He says, "You are now a member of the 1st Division Marksmanship Unit Pistol Team." So that was my job for the next year and a half, to travel the United States shooting 3 calibers of pistol, 22, 38, and 45, in competition with other military, police, and civilians. And I traveled all the eastern United States, even Camp Perry, and did very, very well. At the time, they had like sharpshooter, expert, and master. But then the master class was getting kind of big, so they cut it in half and made the top half grandmasters. of which I became a Grand Master. So I did very, very well in that. Set some new records, won a lot of trophies. I do have some pictures you can look up here later of actually my some of them that I won early on there. This was my license for audio and visual. This was right after I got out of the service, and I shot in the area with different pistol clubs. And as you can see, I did really good. It looks like there's only 4 rounds in this, but there's actually 5. One of them is almost identically through the other one. So I really had a great tour. The entire year and a half that I traveled with the pistol team, I had duty once, and that was CQ. You answered the phone at night. But that week, we were doing a special match, and they said, no, you eat, sleep, and shoot. There's no work that you do, which was okay with me. One thing that happened as an aircraft mechanic, we were out in the field, but as mechanics with what we do with the equipment we do it on, we didn't go in the field. We stayed at the hangar because it was freezing cold out there in Kansas. And we would probably do more damage out in the cold working on that stuff than it would be any good. So we ended up sleeping in the hangar also. And I would call my wife and ask her, bring out a little food, and she brought some orange juice and some of that white stuff, I forget what it was that you put in orange juice. And that night I was sleeping on the floor in the hangar, and I felt something funny in my mouth, and I wiped it, and it felt wet. I wiped it again, and it was wet again. I got up and went into the John, and my face was all bloody. The only thing we have in hangars are birds and rats. And this rat must have smelled the orange juice and bit me twice in the lip, because on the inside were chisel type teeth, and on the outside was puncture round type. 2 complete bites where he bit me before I woke up. So I thought, first it scared me. You think like it's a rattlesnake and this is going to go through your system. You got to get to the hospital. Well, the hospital was way up on post. So I went to the little hut we had there with a medic inside, and he says, well, I don't have a truck or nothing to get you up there. And I thought, gee, that's odd. You think you'd have somebody on the airfield that had connections with there. And I went back outside, and some kid was in a car sleeping. Apparently he went to town and got drunk, come back with his buddy's car. So I dragged him out of the car, and I stole the car myself and drove up to the main post to get taken care of. And this major nurse, she come up and said, well, how do you know you were bit by a rat? And I explained, we only have birds and rats in a hangar. And she questioned that, but anyhow, they decided to give me the rabies series, which is, I forgot now, 9 shots, 8 or 9 shots around the belly button. But each shot stays with you for 4 days. I think it was 4 or 6 days. So the 4th and 5th day, you're looking for a new spot to put a shot, and you're so swollen up you can't even get your pants on. But I started the shots there, and then I was to come home on leave. And I think I only had 2 shots there. I came home and they says, well, go to your doctor so you can continue these shots. So when I came back to Brunswick, I went to a local doctor, and he was a foreign gentleman, and he says, oh yeah, I see a lot of rabies in the old country. And I says, well, what did they do? And he says, oh, they all died. Well, now I'm thrilled. he says, well, I don't have any serum, so I had to call the county itself to see if they had serum for rabies. And they said, no, we don't have any, we'll have to get it out of Cleveland. Well, this was 64, so that was quite a while ago. So they got some sent out, and I took it to him, and he gave me a shot. And then I realized, well, giving a shot isn't that hard, and my mother-in-law used to be a nurse, so she gave me a few. And then I thought, well, this is no big deal, so I gave myself the last 5 shots. The shot is nothing to take, but the next minute or two was hell. It's like you opened you up and poured hot water in you. It was not fun at all. But I got through that episode. And like I say, I really enjoyed my time in there because most of it was traveling on the country shooting pistol. I did go back to my unit near the end because I was very short term. And I couldn't go any higher in shooting. The next step would be all Army, where you actually go to the Olympics. And I was too short for that. And I wasn't going to re-up just to stay in that. So, but I really had a wonderful tour in the service. Learned a lot. Met some interesting people, as I'm sure everybody did. You might have been one of those interesting people. But consequently from that, I always thought, boy, if I had my way, every youngster would come out of school and go into the service for, I don't care how short, just to learn the respect and honor that went along with that. That's something they knew how to teach back then. But back then, they took you out back and taught you. And that was fine. I remember a lot of times going out and helping my buddies that did something wrong, and they made them bust down an old brick chimney and carry the blocks off to a site. And I really felt sorry for him, so I went out and helped him that whole time he had to do it. It was very interesting. I'm sure we all have stories of our service time. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I would do it again if I had the body to do it that I had then. But it taught me an awful lot that I carried on in life. After I got out of the service, I went into tool and die making. I was a tool and die maker, and did a lot of things like that, and ended up realizing that the people I'm working for didn't even understand what was going on. So how do you get ahead there? And that's when I decided to go into excavating on my own. And I spent 45 years in my own excavating business around Medina County mostly. Did go into Cleveland to a few businesses there and told them, gee, I ought to get somebody that's local. I'm charging you from when I leave home. No, we want you, and we'll pay for that extra time, which was an honor in itself. Did excavating for a long, long time. Did very well with it. Got into tractor pulling afterwards. And started youth education through motorsports within our own motorsports, which was really gratifying in a way. But I started looking for kids. The Career Center used to bring a busload of kids every year to go through my facility to see what I did then. And some kids didn't realize you could make an aluminum head out of a block of aluminum. It wasn't cast. Excuse me. It was a solid piece that they'd machine, valve pockets and everything. But I was looking for that kid that had the drive, determination, desire that I had as a kid, and they were hard to find. You couldn't even find a kid that would want to come over and learn something. They all wanted to push buttons or something, play video games. But I did find a young man that had that drive. So as a motorsports team, we gave him a Sandman Motorsports Merit Award. And some of my sponsors, who were Lincoln Electric and Channel Lock and some big people, Lincoln gave us a welder to give him. Tool companies gave us tools to give him, and we made it a big presentation. He was just a young man in high school. But he made a lot of money on the side fixing all his buddies' broken toys and stuff, welding them up. He took and mounted a Briggs & Stratton motor on the back fender of his bicycle so it was powered. He built a motorized bar stool. He built go-karts, all kinds of things. He moved to West Virginia, and I drove down there to see him graduate high school. And it was an honor, knowing that maybe I had a part of his life that he took and made it into something. Then he went on to college, and now he's going into his ending his third year working for a company. He's a nuclear engineer. I can't even spell it, and he is it, you know. It's quite an accomplishment from a young man that I'm very happy to know maybe I had a little part in his life in getting him going. And he's still got that welder and still welds parts for other people. So it was really neat being a part of different things. Recently, I was honored by the DAV that gave me a very nice plaque and a letter. I try to support as much as I can the veterans. I house the truck that our local veterans here have for parades and so forth. They keep it at my place, and I try to maintain it and keep it growing and going if they need something done for it. While I was in the service and traveling the country with pistol, I became a certified instructor for pistol. So that was part of my job during my tour. And since as a pistol team, we were highly qualified to use what we did, we were on call with the MPs. If someone broke out of the stockade or whatever and they became armed, they would call us out. Because I'm sorry to say, there was a lot of MPs that shot on other pistol teams, and I could not believe, and the police forces. You would think someone that's their job and that can save their life, that they'd be really good at it. They weren't. It was unbelievable how poor they were with that, knowing that it may save your life or others. But I was a certified instructor, and after I got out, I used to teach lawyers, doctors that were interested in possible self-defense. I would tell them to go to a flea market and buy the biggest, ugliest vase that they could find. And as I did at home, I had a .38, and the first 2 rounds were reptile shot. Because if you had to fire a round within the house, you don't want it going through walls and killing one of the kids or somebody else. So you'd have 2 rounds of reptile shot that will definitely get their attention. I've never had the experience with someone on drugs or that, but I understand sometimes the drugs take them beyond their even knowledge of being hurt, you know. So thankfully I didn't ever have to address that. I did have the honor several years ago. I have a corner in my big building where I house the equipment that I've built over the years. I will give anyone that would like one a card that has my address on it. I'm not sure it does have my address, to tell you the truth. We just went through that. But I'd gladly give it to you, and if you folks would like to come over as a group, I would give you a tour through that. After getting out of the service and starting in excavating and getting married, I then turned back to my racing days, which was a big love of mine, and ended up, my wife and I went to Ohio State Fair and heard a bunch of noise over in an area, and we went over and looked, and here there were tractor pulling. And I thought, wow, that looks pretty neat. That engine's sitting right out there, easy to work on, no problems. So I got into that in 1982. Well, several years later, I went to 2 engines. And then after that, you always got to go for more. So I ended up with 5 supercharged engines on my tractor.
Wow.
9,000 horsepower. And I traveled most of the United States, from maybe Nebraska east and Canada, and pulled all over different places, from Florida to Vermont to Canada, Nebraska, Missouri. Had a wonderful time. Met a lot of wonderful people. A lot of them were farmers, good people. And traveled a lot, saw a lot, because I didn't travel much other than in the service, traveling from state to state shooting, which you're just getting there and getting back, not much to really see and enjoy. I did win a Grand National event and beat the very best in the country. So I did make it to the top, and I was happy to do that. One other point in my place where I have all this on display, I have a corner to honor all veterans of all wars. We have a veterans guest list that veterans can sign. I've had veterans stand there with tears in their eyes thanking me, and I try to explain to them, no, this is to thank you. One particular veteran I had come was Thomas Austin, and I have a picture of him in 1944 with some of his fellow mates and Lena Horne. And then a picture of him along with the rest of his group that graduated. They were all Tuskegee Airmen. And he brought me a hat and some medals that the government gave him. I met him about 3 years ago when he visited my place, and I have that documented there. He has since passed away 2 years ago. But it was quite an honor meeting with him and knowing what those boys went through, you know. And they were really, really good. Like I say, I have a card y'all can take. I have a website that you can go on and see. And if you'd like to get together at some time and come over as a group, I'd be more than happy to give you a tour through there. It's mostly automotive oriented of things that I've built over the last 20 years or so. I still am building. This is a picture of me 2 weeks ago in a car that I built 3 years ago and never had the chance to drive. Because of my legs, I couldn't get in to drive it, and I've had several operations. But an hour after that picture, that was me driving it.
Oh.
And it's a wheel stander. The engine, as you can see, is in the back, and it goes to the drag strip and stands up on its rear wheels and goes the entire length on its rear wheels. You steer with foot brakes. Now I can push with my feet, but I have trouble retracting them. I can't stand because I can't hold my balance, but I can at least push. But I'm working on that. I bought a used treadmill and I built a carriage over it with a remote control winch that can pick up the belt that I put on so that I won't fall. And we're working on getting me to get them muscles back and get working again. So we're working on that project. This was kind of a bucket list thing where after building that entire vehicle other than the body, I bought the body, but I engineered and built everything to drive it within the confines of that body. I didn't want to pass on and not ever drive it. It'd be like reading a really good mystery and somebody tore out the last 10 pages. So I got that done. And I'm going to try, and that was rock and race down at the new Dragway 42. I have plans on going back there next year and running it again, and I'll be 80 years old then. So that will be an undertaking in itself. Any questions?
Carl,
Yes.
I notice you're not wearing glasses.
Correct.
I know that when you're shooting pistols contests, you've got to have some pretty sharp eyes.
Yes.
How are you doing now?
Well, I wore glasses then, although in shooting we wore special glasses, colored, that made it even sharper for us. And oddly enough, you mentioned that. I always looked for an advantage in whatever I did to make yourself better. So I used to carry a little bottle of white paint and a pin, and I would take and put it in that white paint, and I'd put a little white dot on the front sight of all my pistols. And that's what I would focus on, is that little white dot, not the sight, not the rear sight, just that white dot. Because we've learned that your subconscious will take and do some job for you. As I taught shooting in the service, we try to have a tight group when we shoot. And I'd have guys that would be all over the place, and I'd tell them, you're looking at the target. You got to look at the front sight. Well, I am. And I'd say, okay, let's try something. I'm going to take this target and put it up, but I put it up backwards. Now they don't have anything to look at, so they look at the sight, and all of a sudden their group tightens right up. Because where that bullet goes is in relation to where the front sight is in the rear sight. And if you have something like that little white dot, and then I would take the pin and put a little pin prick in the middle of it, and I'd focus on that. But I did wear glasses back then. Since then, I've had cataract surgery. Now I need them for up close, and I don't need them for far away. So yeah, everything is important in everything we do to be better at it. I know in shooting, we never wore jewelry or watches. You tied your shoes the same tightness on both sides. You never wore tight clothes. Anything that would distract from your concentration level had to be precise. But very good point. And oddly enough, and your name again?
Dick Stauffer.
Mr. Stauffer used to work at Shepherd Ford, and that was really my first, almost my first job. I used to put groceries out at a little store in Brunswick, but then I went to work for Shepherd Ford, where he worked, and that's where I started, really.
One other question back on the pistols that you were trained with, and 38, 45, what else did you say?
22.
Oh, okay.
3 different calibers we shot. And they were all match weapons. We had a fella that made sure they were all right with very sensitive triggers, and yeah, he took care of all our weapons for us. We just ate, slept, and shot.
In training in the Navy, we had 45 and 38. 45 was all over the place, 38 was dead on.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, a lot of people had trouble with the old 45. There again, they probably didn't have the right training for them to be really accurate. Even though our weapons were very precise, you got to believe in what you're doing. And like I say, that little white dot on my front target, that was my entire focus, and that automatically set everything up. And I never looked at the target. The subconscious would do that for you. Anyone else? You're welcome to. On the back side of the front sight on the pistol. In other words, you're looking at the front sight in relation to the rear sight, but I'd put that little white dot right in the center with the little pinprick in the center, and that's what I'd focus all my concentration on. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl.
Thank you.
This is for you just from the library to
Oh,
say
thank
thanks
you.
for coming in.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.